Bartholomew Town is brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, Newport Film, and Half Street Group.
Bartholomew Town.
Jeff Hall, Audubon Society of Rhode Island. Thanks so much for coming over and making the time here.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me on the show.
So we want to talk about Repower Audubon, which is an initiative that is Audubon is aiming to be net zero emissions by 2030. That's an ambitious goal, and it's something that I want to get into the report, which I've had a chance to review. Just to start right now, though, because we were just kind of chatting before we began the podcast about, just to remind folks, Rhode Island is an amazing place when it comes to birding, nature as a whole, being able to connect, because you're proximate no matter where you are. As you were saying, within 15 minutes or so, you can be out in the woods and essentially away from civilization.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we protect 10,000 acres in the state of Rhode Island. 13 of our properties are open to the public for free hiking, from North Smithfield to Tiverton to Ashaway. And you can get in the state. It's one of the nicest things. You can be sailing on the bay in the morning and hiking in the woods in the afternoon. And it's just a unique opportunity for everybody to connect with nature. And
yeah, it's so special. And it's one of the things for me, it drew me back from, I was in New York, and it was one of the things that drew me back here was being able to get out and have that experience. And even on a whim, like yesterday morning, I went to Lincoln Woods, and so it was a work day yesterday. I had a podcast in the morning. I had a radio show in the afternoon, the whole thing. But I was able to carve out that 90 minutes to meet up with a friend at 8 o'clock in the morning and do a loop through the ice. But it was so maybe not the best day.
It's a skating rink out there now
it was
everywhere.
A little bit much. But it's right there, and it's so important. I think in this political moment, this societal moment, more than ever, it's so important to reconnect with all of the creatures, the trees, the plants, the birds, and it sounds a little bit high and mighty or esoteric or spiritual or something, but I really think we just need to get grounded, and we'd start to be able to carve out a better world if more people could find that time.
Absolutely. We have gotten so many calls, actually since the pandemic, because we did not close our refuges down when the state closed the parks down.
Yep.
And compliment after compliment, like people were able to get outside, sort of leave the stress of that whole time, right? And it's the same today. Unfortunately, after the election, people were a little stressed about what was going on, and I had someone come in and say, getting out to our refuge in Seacon, Caratunk was the best thing I could have done on that day. I just needed to ground myself. So yes. It does. Nature does that.
So specifically Audubon, a lot of work with birds. We've done a couple of podcasts where we've talked in depth about birding in Rhode Island. Just sort of a quick version of this right now where we're at. We're not quite at spring birding season, that's for sure. I wish we were. But it's an exciting time, and there's a lot of programming that's specific that Audubon offers from a birding standpoint. How can people find out more about some of the programming you offer? Also, there is winter programming too.
Absolutely. In fact, birding in Rhode Island is actually best in the winter. You've got sea ducks coming close to shore, Satyrus Point, Truston Pond, harlequin ducks, long-tailed ducks, all kinds of scoter, incredibly beautiful birds that you would never recognize because they're not here in the summer. So when you're at the beach normally. Owls are out. This is mating season for owls. We do a lot of owl prowls. Going to our website, asri.org, lists all our programs. We have beginning bird walks to regular Wednesday morning bird walks. We are starting a naturalist series where we're going to talk about the sort of whole gamut of general natural history. We did a tracking course a couple of weeks ago. We did geology this past weekend. So a whole series of things to get people to understand nature, because we believe when people understand nature, they'll value it and they'll protect things that they value.
Well said. All right, speaking of protecting things we value, how about our planet? It's something that somehow or another, climate and the notion that we should have a better version of how we approach, it's not just limited to fuels and fossil fuels, just a general appreciation for conservation of our planet here. It's sad that it's become so politicized. It's something that growing up for me in Charlestown, I remember a lot of swamp Yankees, a lot of people who would identify as conservative, and all the way through sort of the hippie movement that took place in Charlestown around the Umbrella Factory. My dad would take us out to pick up litter as a little kid. I would do a lot of litter cleanups, a lot of things like that. And it seemed like if there was one area that everybody agreed on, it's that we've got to protect the earth from a conservation standpoint. Yet now people are literally refuting science that shows that we're in danger of, maybe not in our lifetimes, maybe not in our children's lifetimes, but pretty quickly we're going to see a huge shift in what our planet is. In fact, we already are seeing that when you look at wildfires and other rising sea levels. There are plenty of examples right now. So the Audubon Society, Repower Audubon, an effort to go net zero by 2030. Where did this idea specifically come from?
So I'll tell you, I've been with Audubon for 20 plus years, been the executive director for the last 2. And I joke that when I started this executive director job, I didn't know what HVAC stood for, right? But I inherited our nature center HVAC system, which had come to its end of its life. One of the units, just literally the bottom rusted out. So we needed to replace it. And so, environmental organizations always want to say, do this, do that. But sometimes we actually don't follow the same things that we're preaching, right? So we decided that we could easily replace the units with gas-fired and just get them back online. But we decided to take a deep dive, really led by our board of directors who are very passionate about this issue, that we hired an engineering company, looked at the entire portfolio. We have, as I mentioned, we have a number of refuges. We were the first land trust really in the state back in 1912. So a lot of times our property would come with houses. So we have some houses that we have to maintain. So we wanted to look at all the properties and see what our energy use was, and then we sort of tasked this engineering firm, create us a roadmap to get to net zero as efficiently, as cheaply, and as least ecologically damaging as possible, right? So they looked at all our facilities, like talking about the envelopes of the buildings, what appliances, and how the hot water was heated, and then to reduce that energy use of each property, and then look at how we could offset that with solar. So no surprise when you run an aquarium like we do in Bristol 24/7, that takes a lot of energy. In fact, that building uses more than half our energy of the entire organization. So that's where the problem had started, and that's where we started this project. So we've just replaced all the HV system there with air source heat pumps, and they're all working, but we're just wrapping it up now. That's the first step. It was a half $500,000 project for us. The second part of that is we're going to put carport canopies over the parking lots at our nature center and our office building in Smithfield. Those 2 installations will power the entire organization through virtual net metering. So it makes a lot of sense, not only from it's mission driven, it's good for the environment, and honestly, what I've learned over the last year is it makes a lot of business sense as well. Right.
That's something a lot of people forget about, is it makes, from an efficiency standpoint, there's also a lot of tax credits available. And by the way, it's probably appealing from a nonprofit standpoint to grant those who offer grants and those who want to make donations. I mean, it's not going to necessarily be the thing that moves the needle, but it can't hurt to outline it.
Absolutely. So since we've come public with this campaign, it's been really well received. We've gotten donations from people in Massachusetts that are not on our list that must have heard about it and said we want to support that. And again, if you're part of this campaign is to show others how to do it as well, right? We have a 17,000-foot building. There's other buildings out there. Look, we've been able to do this relatively inexpensively. We don't have to rip out walls and put in new piping and ductwork and all. We're able to do it with new technology. It's not rocket science. Its technology is readily available right now, right? And so we're just using that. The stumbling block is, the cost up front. We are hoping that the federal tax credits, the direct pay from the IRS, will continue in the future. That is a big question mark right now.
Yes.
I mean, that's part of our sort of capital stack of building this project. But we are committed. We are down to 2 developers for the solar carport units. We're going to decide either the end of this month or next month who that's going to be, and we're going to go forward on this because this is the right thing to do.
Yes, it's authentic as well. Authenticity seems to be something that is hard to find more and more, at least from my standpoint. Again, people practicing what they preach from the standpoint of making this effort to go net zero by 2030. It's an aggressive goal, but you're proving also that we'll find out, but it seems to be it's going to be attainable, and it's not this wild pie in the sky idea. You know, sometimes the pushback comes when we hear about our statewide vehicular emissions regulations that are tied to California, and you'll get people saying, well, you know, first of all, they don't really understand the actual law, which is that you can't purchase a new vehicle that's not hybrid. It doesn't have to be full electric by 2034. And that's the trend, by the way, as someone who's looking for a new vehicle recently. That's what automotive manufacturers are doing anyway. So It's basically an irrelevant discussion. But the amount of pushback I hear, especially on the radio, sometimes I turn on certain radio shows and I hear people that make it seem like this is some kind of hoax that is just another inconvenience, there's some gimmick there. It seems pretty basic and attainable. You're proving that.
Right, exactly. So what's the cliche? Nothing certain but death and taxes and electric bills, right? So when we're looking at this project, over the course of the 25 years, once we add the solar, if we did not add the solar, we'd spend somewhere in the vicinity of $2.3 million over the next 25 years in utility costs. Once we install this unit, we'll be saving that, but actually the return on investment is like $1.2 million. Not only on the savings of the electricity, but also we'll sell credits on the electricity we produce. So again, it's a payback of 11 years. We're never giving up this property and these buildings. So if you're in a building that you own and you're going to be there for a long time, if you're in your home, it just makes dollars and cents. You need to do this. And we all know that it's an investment up front, but it's going to pay back over time financially, but it's also, good for the environment.
And that's the other thing too. As an organization that is immersed in, is an advocate for, is symbiotic with so much of nature and specifically with birds, we don't know what the birds necessarily are saying. Some scientists have tried to figure this out, and they can sort of mirror what is communicated between birds and try to create language out of it. We don't have that ability yet, but you have to think that at some point some of them are going, oh, what are these people doing? We're all in this together. You guys have the power to change the direction of the world, and by not doing it, it's selfish. You're impacting us as well.
Well, birds are not doing well. It's climate is affecting all birds, or 95% of them, will eat insects, especially when they're fledgling young, right? Mm-hmm. And so over time, evolutionarily, birds have migrated based on when insect populations boom. With global warming, that insect boom is happening earlier. So birds are arriving, but the plentiful food of insects and caterpillars and all has now declining and passed. So fledgling rates are down. Pesticides use is increased. Insects really are sort of I know we're going off topic, but the building block of nature, right? Insects feed the whole food chain. And so when that mismatch, it's phenological mismatch, they call it, that things are just moving earlier. Birds do not, change their migratory timing overnight, right? It's it's a millennial of time, and then the increase in use of pesticides like neonicotinoid pesticides that are just wiping out insects. They're wiping out the food source. It's reducing the reproductive rates of birds, and they're suffering.
Yes, it's a tragedy, and there's also this aspect to it that I think the more you get involved in a relationship with nature, the more you get involved with a relationship with people who are around and work in various aspects of natural spaces, whether they're involved in marine life, whether they're involved in avian life, farmers, whoever it is, you start to realize that these people have, it's not a sixth sense, but they have an extra layer of understanding about the consequences of what you just outlined right there. And it's easy to dismiss if you're not connected to this arena. And that's why it's so important I think it's so important for people to get outdoors, spend time with nature, spend time with people who are close to nature. If you know a farmer, ask them questions about what they're seeing, because they're going to tell you that, exactly like you said, things are changing in a way that is not good for most of the animal life that we're surrounded by.
Yes, and a lot of people sometimes say, so, what's the big thing about birds, Audubon?
Yeah.
Well, birds are how people connect with nature. They're the wildlife that people see, whether you're in the city, in the country. They're at your feeder. They're at the beach. They're flying overhead. You'll see. We now have bald eagles nesting in the States, so you'll see a giant bald eagle flying over. You'll see vultures going around. People see birds, and I'll tell you, when something's happening at a house, I'm not getting as many blue jays at my house, we get calls.
Yep.
Right? It's that connection to nature. If we started talking about climate change and neonicotinoid pesticides and all that, people's eyes glaze over. But when you talk about birds, right? They listen and they go, oh, I understand what you mean here. They are changing, and at your point, the people who live closest to the land are seeing these changes first, and they could be whatever the political spectrum, right? But they're knowing they see that the environment is changing, and
yes,
we have to make steps to correct that.
Getting back to the report, what are some of the big takeaways from your standpoint inside of the Repower Audubon? We've outlined a lot of them, but are there any big takeaways that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's a big project. It's aggressive, 2030. Again, as we talked about, it's not rocket science. The technology's there. We're not, we're not doing geothermal because the price of geothermal was expensive. Although if you look at, again, the math, it is the most efficient heating. But,
which is sorry to interrupt, but that's what the Newport Mansions, for example, they installed a large-scale geothermal system and kind of did the evaluation of tax credit versus expense. It did seem like it was an enormously expensive process. So it's a good idea and it's efficient, but also there's practicality.
Well, exactly, right? Everything comes down to dollars and cents, right? I mean, it is the most expensive to install, but it's the most efficient over time.
Yeah.
And again, but it's not just the buildings. We've replaced all our trail maintenance machinery with battery. We've gotten off fossil fuel.
Yep.
I get pushed back on chainsaws now and then because you need powerful chainsaw. But our lawnmowers that maintain our trails and our nature center, are all now electric. We've gone to hybrid vans. We have a grant from the Natural Resource Conservation Service for an electric tractor to maintain fields. Now, I will say that we just got notice that funding has been put on hold, so I'm not sure where that's going to head. But every little step that we do is going to add to this goal. Our aspirational goal is for 2040 to be true zero, where with advancements of battery technology, we'll be able to sort of take ourselves off the grid, that will store the energy that we produce and then not have to be tied to the grid. Even in this repower, we're always going to be connected to the grid because we're producing energy during the day, but we're taking energy off the grid at night. So our goal is to produce as much as the organization uses, getting us to net zero. And
then lastly, on the federal funding, we'll see where this goes. In fact, the sequence of when these will air, people have heard Attorney General Noronha and his discussion about some of his litigation against the Trump administration's executive actions, and particularly with funding right now. It's a concern nonprofit sector wide that this is an issue. But from your standpoint, not even getting political about it, but just how important is it that funding streams for organizations like Audubon societies writ large remain intact? Why is this a critical area that should face no significant opposition from a funding formula standpoint? Right. Well, governments protect the environment, right? Some businesses do, but their profit motives are going to be, extraction or whatever. But the government funds basic research. Why? What's the health of the estuaries? How's that lead to? So without basic research, without the funds from the government to do research, to implement plans, there's just not an economic model there that makes that happen in the private sector. So
This is important. And again, we'll see over time how this goes. We have a lot of support with our congressional delegation. They're all, obviously all supportive of the environment, all supportive of this federal funding, and we'll just see how it goes. But repower is going to go on no matter what, because we'll finance it if we have to, because in the end, it's the best thing for us to do. Other
Audubon societies around the country, are they engaged in similar work, or is this something that you're leading on?
Bigger organizations are doing it piecemeal. I don't know of one that's taken the step to take the entire organization
A little
as
different
quickly.
if you're Texas or California.
Yeah, exactly,
I suppose.
right.
Yeah,
but I've talked to other nonprofits in the state who, we had a nice article in the Providence Journal by Alex Kuffner, and reached out to us and said, hey, we want to do that too. Thanks for leading on this. Can you give us some advice how to do it? And that's really, what we hoped that this campaign would do, is be a leader, be able to push this movement forward.
If we ever get a benevolent person that steps up and says, hey, we'll buy your building for you here at our loft space, day one would be this entire rooftop, this gigantic facility that we're in, of which I only have a small chunk of. I mean, it would be solar all the way. And I think that a building-wide initiative as well on a micro level, so you have organizations that are making the effort to go net zero. Of course, there are things just in an old building like this, how much conversion? You can't put a geothermal system. Well, I guess you could, and the Newport Mansions did, but right. Practically speaking, no. But there are small steps that individuals can take and that property owners can take that, again, this is the right thing to do. It's a good thing to do, but also from a financial picture, it makes sense. Right. It's not. It's been spun. The manufacturing of consent around solar and anything net zero is bad has been really effective by the same people who are killing the earth. Right.
Yeah. That's unfortunate. And again, this building is perfect for that. Right. Yeah. I think we need to sort of look at our energy production individually. Right. If we are fortunate to own a home, putting solar on your roof adds to the amount of renewables out there. Right. And Absolutely. That's the fastest growing energy source pre the current administration.
Jeff Hall, Audubon Society of Rhode Island, thanks so much for everything you do for the state. Thanks for the programming that you present. Thanks for the advocacy, and now this leadership in a way that is hopefully going to start a trend of more organizations looking to do this. And again, even on a micro level, if you're hearing this right now, there are things that you can do. I know, I'll give you an example. My sister, she tried to turn her house into all solar. They got the panel out front. There are limitations. I mean, in terms of how far an individual can go to go off the grid, unless you're ready to go my side of the mountain and eat acorn pancakes all morning or whatever it is. But, really, it's taking practical steps and from an organizational standpoint, evaluating what makes sense with an S and with a C, because both can coexist, and you're proving it.
Right. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And let's repower together.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram @BillBartholomew.